They changed the time of the will reading on purpose, made sure everyone knew except me, and then sat in that room laughing like I didn't exist, like I had already been erased from the family. And when I walked in anyway, my mother-in-law didn't even try to hide her smile. She just looked at me and said, "You're not supposed to be here," while my husband stayed seated, eyes on the table, saying nothing, not a single word, as if I had already been written out of his life long before that night. And I remember standing there for a second, feeling every pair of eyes on me, feeling that quiet kind of humiliation that doesn't shout but sits heavy in your chest. And if you've ever been in a moment like that, where you realize you've been pushed out without even being told, then go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and share where you're watching from, along with your local time, only if this story truly resonates with you. Because what happened that night didn't just change my place in that room. It changed everything I thought I knew about my family. My name is Charlotte Hayes. I'm 42 years old, a senior officer in the United States Army, and this was the night my husband's family tried to erase me from their future, without realizing they had already signed it over to me. It started 3 weeks earlier, right after my father-in-law passed away. The house had been quiet then. Too quiet. The kind of silence that feels temporary, like everyone is waiting for something else to happen. I had just returned from a 2-week assignment, still unpacking my bags when Daniel told me the will reading would be handled privately, his exact words. And I remember asking him what that meant, because in my world, nothing important is ever handled in vague language, but he just shrugged, said it was a family matter, and I didn't push, not because I didn't care, but because I had learned over the years that pushing too hard in that family only made things worse. They had never really accepted me, not completely, not the way they accepted each other. There was always a line, invisible but clear, and I was always standing just outside of it. And still, I believed that when something as serious as a will was involved, that line wouldn't matter. I was wrong. 2 days before the reading, I noticed something small, a group message notification on Daniel's phone lighting up the kitchen counter. I wasn't trying to look, but the screen was right there, and I saw his brother's name, his sister's name, even his stepmother's, all talking about Thursday morning, and I remember thinking that was strange, because Daniel had told me Friday afternoon. I didn't say anything right away. I just watched, waited, the way I was trained to. Observe first, act later. That night, I asked him again, casually, "What time is the reading?" And he didn't even hesitate. "Friday, around 3, he said, not looking up from his phone. And that was the moment something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet realization settling in, like a weight. Something wasn't right, something didn't line up. But I didn't confront him. I didn't accuse him. I just nodded, said, "Okay," and let the silence sit between us. Because sometimes silence tells you more than any answer ever could. And by the next morning, I already knew what they had done. I just needed to see how far they were willing to go. I did not go on Friday. I did not show up at 3 in the afternoon like Daniel had told me. Instead, I drove to the house early Thursday morning, parked across the street, and sat there with the engine off, watching, because if they had nothing to hide, then there would be nothing to see. But at exactly 9:15, cars started pulling in. His brother's black SUV first, then his sister's white sedan, then his stepmother, all arriving too calmly, too precisely, like they had already agreed on something long before I was ever supposed to know. And I remember tightening my grip on the steering wheel, not out of anger, but out of clarity, because in that moment it stopped being a suspicion and became a fact. They had planned this, and Daniel was part of it. I sat there for another minute, just breathing, letting the reality settle in, because once you accept something, you can finally decide what to do with it. And I did not rush. I did not storm in. I adjusted my jacket, checked the time again, and walked across the street like I had every right to be there, because I did. The front door was already open when I stepped inside, voices low, controlled, the kind people use when they think they are being careful. And as soon as I entered the living room, everything shifted, not loudly, but enough. Conversations slowed, heads turned, and for a second, no one spoke. His stepmother was the first to react, her smile thin, polite, but strained at the edges. "Charlotte," she said, like she had not expected to see me, like my presence had complicated something. His brother leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, studying me with that same quiet judgment he had always carried. And Daniel, he did not stand, he did not come toward me. He just looked up briefly, then back down at the table, and that told me everything I needed to know. There was no surprise on his face, no confusion, just discomfort. Like a plan had gone slightly off track, I took a few steps forward and chose a seat near the end of the table, not too close, not too far, just enough to make it clear I was staying. No one offered me anything. No greeting, no explanation, just silence filling the space between us. And then his mother cleared her throat, a small sound, but sharp. "This is a private family discussion," she said, her voice calm but firm. And I met her eyes without raising my voice. "I am family," I replied, not louder than necessary, just enough to be heard. She did not like that. I could see it in the way her fingers tightened around her glass, but she did not argue further. Instead, she glanced toward the lawyer sitting at the head of the table, as if expecting him to fix the situation for her. He was older, composed, flipping through a folder with slow, deliberate movements, and for a moment he said nothing, just observed. And that silence stretched longer than anyone expected. Daniel shifted slightly in his chair. His brother exhaled impatiently, and I could feel the tension building, not explosive, but heavy, like something was about to surface whether they wanted it to or not. The lawyer finally adjusted his glasses and spoke. His voice even controlled. "If everyone is present, we can begin." And that word, everyone, landed differently than they expected. I saw it in their faces, a flicker of uncertainty, subtle but real. His stepmother opened her mouth as if to correct him, to say that not everyone was supposed to be there, but she stopped, just for a second, and in that second, the room shifted again, because for the first time, it was not clear who actually belonged at that table, and who did not. The lawyer opened the folder slowly, like he was in no hurry at all, and began reading in a calm, measured voice that filled the room without ever rising. And at first, everything sounded exactly the way they expected it to. Properties listed one by one, accounts, investments, shares, each asset carefully assigned. His brother leaned forward slightly as his name came up. His sister nodded almost immediately when hers followed. Their stepmother sat back with a quiet confidence that did not even try to hide itself. And I watched all of it without moving, without interrupting, just listening, because what mattered was not what was being said, but how it was being said. The lawyer never rushed, never skipped, every detail precise, every sentence deliberate. And the more he read, the more relaxed they became. I could see it in their posture, the way shoulders dropped, the way hands loosened around glasses and folders. Even Daniel shifted slightly, like something inside him had started to settle, like whatever doubt had been there before was fading, and for a moment, it almost looked like relief, like they believed everything had gone according to plan. No one looked at me anymore. I had already been dismissed in their minds, reduced to someone sitting quietly at the edge of the table, irrelevant, unnecessary, and that was exactly where they thought I belonged, the lawyer continued, assigning percentages, outlining access, explaining structures in simple terms. And each time a name was called, there was a small reaction, a glance, a nod, a barely contained smile, nothing loud, nothing obvious, but enough to show that they were already dividing something that had not yet been fully understood. And I noticed something else too, something small but consistent. Every asset came with conditions, language that sounded standard, almost routine, but repeated too often to be random. Phrases like subject to approval and dependent on authorization, subtle, easy to overlook if you were not paying attention. But I always was, and that was the difference. I was not listening for what I wanted to hear. I was listening for what did not fit. His sister leaned closer to Daniel at one point, whispering something under her breath, and he gave a short nod, like confirmation, like agreement, and I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pain, not anger, just recognition. This was never about fairness. It was about control, always had been, and they thought they had secured it, that they had finally placed everything exactly where they wanted it. The lawyer turned a page, paused briefly, and adjusted his glasses. That pause was small, but it changed the room. Conversations stopped completely. Even the quiet movements, the subtle shifts, everything slowed, like the air itself had thickened, and for the first time since he began, he looked directly at me. Not quickly, not by accident, but deliberately, holding the gaze for just a second longer than necessary, and something in that look felt different, not questioning, not uncertain, just aware, and then he continued. But the tone had shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, yet enough that I could feel it, like we were no longer moving forward, but approaching something. Daniel noticed it too. I saw the way he straightened just a little, his hand pausing on the edge of the table. His brother frowned slightly, as if something did not align with what he expected, and his stepmother's expression tightened, her smile fading just enough to reveal the tension underneath. The lawyer closed the folder halfway, not completely, just enough to mark a transition, and spoke again. Before we proceed to the final structure, there's one clarification that must be understood. And the room went completely still, not silent in a comfortable way, but in that sharp, waiting way, where no one breathes too loudly, no one moves too fast, because something is about to change, and no one knows exactly how. No one spoke after that, not immediately, because the way he said it did not sound optional. It sounded final, and I could feel the shift ripple through the room, subtle but undeniable. His brother leaned forward again, this time slower, like he was trying to catch something he might have missed. His sister stopped smiling completely, her fingers resting still on the table, and Daniel, he finally looked up, not at the lawyer, but at me. Just for a second, like something in his mind had started connecting in a way he did not expect. The lawyer placed the folder flat on the table, one hand resting on top of it, steady, controlled, and continued. All listed assets are distributed under a unified trust structure. His tone remained even, but every word now carried weight, not information, but consequence. Each named individual is granted beneficiary access as outlined, and I saw the confusion begin. Not loud, not dramatic, but present. Small glances exchanged, brief hesitation, the kind that happens when something does not align with what you thought you understood. His stepmother was the first to interrupt, her voice still polite, but tighter now. "Excuse me, but you said everything has already been assigned," and the lawyer nodded once, calmly. "It has," he replied without elaboration, and that answer did not satisfy her. I could see it in the way she shifted slightly in her seat, the way her posture straightened, as if preparing to challenge something she could not yet fully define. "Then what exactly requires clarification?" she asked, and the room leaned into that question, not physically, but in attention, in silence, in expectation. The lawyer did not rush to answer. He turned a single page, glanced down briefly, then looked up again, this time addressing the entire table. "Ownership and control," he said, simply. And those two words landed differently than anything before. His brother frowned openly now, confusion no longer hidden. "I do not understand," he said, and for the first time, there was a trace of impatience in his voice, not aggressive, but strained, like he was losing the sense of certainty he had been holding on to. The lawyer nodded again, acknowledging the reaction without reacting to it. "That is why I am clarifying," he said, still calm, still precise, and then he continued. "While assets are assigned for benefit, no asset may be sold, transferred, or modified without executive authorization." And this time, the room did not stay still. There was movement, small but immediate. His sister shifted back in her chair. His stepmother's hand tightened around her glass. Daniel's jaw set slightly, and I remained exactly where I was, hands still, posture unchanged, because I already knew what was coming. I had known from the moment I saw the wording repeated again and again, from the moment the pattern became clear, but they had not, and that difference mattered. The lawyer paused again, not for effect, but because the structure required it, like he was following a process that could not be rushed. "Executive authorization," he repeated, slower this time, "is held by a single appointed controller." And now the tension was no longer subtle. It was visible, in their eyes, in their posture, in the silence that had grown heavier with every word. His brother spoke again, quicker this time. "Who is that?" And there it was, the question they should have asked earlier, the question they assumed they already knew the answer to. The lawyer did not respond immediately. He turned his head slightly, not fully, just enough, and his gaze landed on me again, steady, deliberate, and in that moment, Before a single word was spoken, before anything was confirmed, the entire room felt it, that quiet, unmistakable shift, the one that happens right before everything changes. The lawyer did not rush. He never did. He simply held that gaze for one more second, just long enough for the weight of it to settle across the table, and then he said it, clear, calm, without emphasis. The appointed controller is Charlotte Hayes. And for a moment, nothing happened. No reaction, no sound, just silence, like the room itself needed time to understand what had just been said. And then I saw it, the shift, not all at once, but one face at a time. His brother blinked first, like he thought he heard it wrong. His sister's expression froze completely, her eyes moving from the lawyer to me and back again, searching for something that would make it make sense. His stepmother did not move at all, but her grip tightened so much around her glass that her knuckles turned pale. And Daniel, he finally looked at me fully, not briefly, not avoiding it, but directly, like he was seeing me for the first time in that room. And I did not look away. I did not react. I just held that moment steady, because this was not the time to speak. The lawyer continued as if nothing unusual had happened, as if he had just read another line from a document. All executive decisions, including sale, transfer, or restructuring of any asset listed, require her written authorization. And now the silence broke, not loudly, but sharply. That is not possible, his brother said too quickly, his voice cutting through the room, and the lawyer turned his head slightly toward him, not defensive, not confrontational, just steady. It is documented and legally binding, he replied. And that answer did not leave space for argument, but it did not stop them from trying. His stepmother leaned forward now, her composure cracking just enough to show urgency. There must be some mistake, she said, her tone controlled but strained, and the lawyer shook his head once, calmly. There is no mistake, he said. And then he opened the folder again, turning it toward them, not pushing it, not offering it, just placing it where it could be seen. And I watched as they leaned in, one by one, reading, scanning, searching for something that would undo what they had just heard. But there was nothing to find, because this was not new information. It had been there the entire time, hidden in the structure they had not bothered to understand. And that was the difference. They had listened for outcomes. I had listened for control, Daniel finally spoke, his voice lower than before. Not angry, not loud, just uncertain. When was this set up? And the lawyer answered without hesitation. 3 years ago, and that landed harder than anything else, because it meant this had nothing to do with today, nothing to do with last week. This had been decided long before any of them realized, long before they planned to exclude me, long before they believed they could control anything. His sister shook her head slightly, almost to herself. Why her? She asked, barely above a whisper. And for the first time, the lawyer paused. Not because he needed time, but because the answer was not written in the same way. That was the decision of your father, he said simply. And that name, their father, carried weight in a way nothing else did, because he was the one person none of them could argue with anymore, the one authority they could not challenge. And I saw it then. Not anger, not outrage, but something quieter, something heavier, realization. The understanding that everything they thought they had secured had already been placed under someone they chose to ignore. And I finally moved. Just slightly. Not dramatic, not sudden, just enough to shift my posture, to make it clear I was no longer just sitting there. I was present, fully, completely. And when I spoke, my voice was calm, even matching the tone that had controlled the room from the beginning. You should keep reading, I said, not as a suggestion, but as a fact, because what they had just heard was only the beginning of what they were about to understand. The room never really returned to the way it was before that moment, not even after the lawyer finished reading the final pages, not even after everyone had gone through the documents again, slower this time, quieter, like they were hoping the words might change if they looked at them long enough. But they did not. Nothing changed, except everything. In the days that followed, the house felt different, conversations were shorter, more careful, and for the first time since I had married into that family, no one spoke over me, no one dismissed me, not because they suddenly respected me, but because they finally understood that control did not always look loud. It did not need to. I moved through my days the same way I always had. Early mornings, structured routines, clear decisions. But something inside me had shifted. Not power, not pride, but clarity. The kind that comes when you stop waiting for people to see your value and start recognizing it yourself. Daniel tried to talk a few times, not immediately, but in those quiet moments when the house was still, his voice softer than I had ever heard it, asking questions he should have asked years ago. But some answers do not come back once they have been ignored for too long. And I realized something important, something simple, that should never have taken this long to understand. You can love someone and still outgrow the version of yourself that stayed silent for them. You can care and still choose distance, not out of anger, but out of respect for yourself. I did not fight them. I did not take anything away. I simply held my ground, signed what needed to be signed, refused what did not align, and slowly, quietly, my life became mine again, not controlled by expectations, not shaped by approval, just mine. And if you are listening to this right now, if you have ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or quietly pushed out of places you were told you belonged, I want you to know something. Your value does not disappear just because someone fails to see it, and your silence does not mean you are weak. Sometimes it means you are waiting, watching, understanding more than anyone realizes. Trust that. Trust yourself. Protect your space, your finances, your peace, because those are the things people often try to take first, and once you learn to guard them, everything else becomes clearer. I also believe, in a quiet way, that there is something greater guiding us through moments like this, whether you call it faith, God, or simply the universe aligning things when we need them most. There is a reason certain truths reveal themselves at the exact moment they do. Not sooner, not later, but right when we are ready to see them. And maybe that is what this was for me. Not a victory over them, but a return to myself. So wherever you are, whatever you are going through, take a breath. You are not alone in this, and you are stronger than the version of you that stayed quiet just to keep the peace. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Truly, it means more than you think. And if any part of this resonated with you, you can share your thoughts, your story, or simply where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now, because sometimes being heard is the first step toward healing. My name is Charlotte Hayes. I am 42 years old, and the lesson I want to leave with you is this. Never let anyone define your worth when you already hold the power to define it yourself.